Hey, good evening. We're back for a Saturday edition of Meteorology Lab, and we've just got more clear skies out there. We have not really had much of anything as far as an active spring here in Texas, or even the winter, really. We have had some storms out in the Amarillo area yesterday, though. So, depending on where you are, it does vary a little bit. This is a photograph from about 4 hours ago by Mike Estwick showing some showers, some tall cumulus clouds and showers up over the mountains, and those are going up along the Front Range. This is looking west from the Arvada area, northwest of Colorado, and you can see kind of like the glaciated tops here. Now, we do have some weather going on elsewhere. Let me scroll over to that, and you can see we've got a slight risk out for the Central Plains from about Iowa down to southwestern Kansas. Might as well go straight to the radar and check that out. There's the activity that we have over western Kansas. And these storms are really not all that large. In other words, the scale of each of these cells, they're on the order of maybe 5 or 6 miles. So probably visually, a lot of these are resembling LP-ish type storms. Down on the southern one, we've just had a tornado warning issued. This is in the Coldwater area, and we've got a radar-indicated rotation on that one along the Oklahoma border. And again, it is a very small cell here. Let me switch over to the lower tilts, and you can see that there. Storm relative velocity. This is showing the rotation at half a degree there. We have to keep in mind that the radar is up to the northwest there. So we see a lot of inbounds in this area right here, and a little bit of outbound here. It looks like the stronger shear may be right in this area here. So I'm seeing maybe about 130 knots there. Just to make sure that this isn't an artifact, I'm going to go up to a higher tilt. And whatever it is, we lose that. So that may just be an artifact there. And you'll see that from time to time. And the other thing we want to do is compare that to the position on the storm itself. Well, it's in the middle of the subdraft area, so I'm not too sure about that. The other thing we can look at is the time consistency. We go back one scan, and yeah, it does look like we are seeing a little bit of maybe some sort of persistent signature there. Still nothing at 0.8 or 1.3 to really bear that out. And we'll go back one more scan here. Yep, I'm seeing about 33 out and about 24 in, so I guess whatever it is probably right in that area. Just barely showing up there, and a lot of that is probably due to the LP characteristics on the storm. But it is in this updraft area, whatever is going on there. And we can go up to the higher tilts here and look for overhang, and we definitely got it. Very top of the storm is up at about 7.9 degrees here, right over that little rotation area. And we're looking here at about 40,000 feet. So probably quite a show there, and I'd imagine there's probably some chaser streams going, watching some of these storms here. And look at that, you can see a little bit of dry line feature right there, and another boundary from about Russell down to Dodge City. So this would be a good time to check out the surface chart. You can see a lot of northerly winds up in the Dakotas and Nebraska. So we've got a little bit of Canadian air coming southward, and down to the south, tropical air flowing northward. And one of the first things you want to look at, especially this time of year, is the moisture axis and kind of figure out where that is. Well, we've got 50s out in this area here. Dew points are also very low in this area in New Mexico and the Texas Panhandle. You can see we've got 20 there at Amarillo. So very dry there. But it does look like we pick up the dry line around the Lubbock area and out near Pampa and Canadian. So I'm going to put that dry line out in this area like that. And we would also blend this in with the radar data. So we would switch over to this and kind of pick up where that feature is and draw that on the analysis chart. And sometimes we'll look at spectrum width to see if there's any features we're missing. And so that'll give us an idea where the dry line is, and if we watch that from hour to hour, we can get an idea of where the position is of any further initiation. And so we know that this other boundary up here is a cold front. So that's going to go something like that right there. And you'll notice that there is a bit of a dew point contrast from south to north across that boundary. A little bit more moist up in this area here. And so when the location of the front is a little hard to find, you can fall back on that dew point field to kind of pin down where that is. So some very dry dew points back here in New Mexico. We got 8 there in Santa Fe and 9 in Albuquerque. And another important feature along that dry line, and probably one reason we were able to squeak a storm out of this, is the convergence. We don't always see convergence along the dry line like what we see here. Sometimes the flow is just kind of parallel on both sides of that. So the amount of convergence you have along that dry line, I find that to be a pretty strong indicator whether you're going to see initiation giving similar amounts of capping from one day to another. Okay, about that moisture axis, let's check out where that is. That's probably going to fall where we have these mid-60s dew points, right there at Chickasha and Bowie and down at Fort Worth and up to around the Enid area, so that's going to be it right there. So this, where it impinges on the boundaries, that is going to be your favorite area for development. And obviously we've already got storms going up, but earlier in the day, when these ingredients are coming together, that can help you find where your initiation is going to take place. Oh, I meant to mention one thing about Mike Estwick's photo. There's one more he sent too. I'd pulled up a Ghost 16 frame here so we could check out what was underneath, and there it is. And again, I appreciate Kachelman, KachelmanVetter.com. And there's Arvada right there, so we're looking that way. And you can see this one little line along the easternmost range right there, just east of Golden and Boulder. And then further in the background along the Continental Divide, you can see another little area forming right there. And that's off here in the background. So, a lot to look at right there in the Colorado skies. Here in the plains, it really depends where you are. And there's that Kansas storm right there. Let me run this back. We're looking at College DuPage here. And you can kind of use this to kind of see how the boundaries shaped up during the afternoon. So we roll that back. And you can see that little area of towering cumulus clustering right here around Canadian up to Slapout and up to Pratt. So you can kind of see this area coming together early on before the targets were clear. So just to run that forward, you see this little turkey tower right here around Canadian, putting out that little detached anvil. And you'll notice that the area of enhanced cumulus, it tends to propagate northward very gradually. So that's going to kind of redefine your target. You'll be able to see everything kind of shifting northward and that would carry your targets with you. And finally, everything is pretty much north of the border there. So that's probably one of the storms of the day right there, right around the Pratt area, the Coldwater. And at the very end, we can see a little bit of overshooting top right there. Pretty spectacular. Okay, this is about where I put up an interesting frame, and I guess I'll go with a satellite loop. And I'll put up that interesting frame while I take a look at chat. Eddie W., first one in here. Greg Schultz, happy Easter tomorrow. Yeah, happy Easter to everybody here. Storms to our south will mess with whatever severe chances we have had in the Milwaukee area. Alexi says, hello, Tim and chat. Hello from Kevin there, and Mick is here. Ryan, Eddie. Saw Eddie further back. He mentions the tornado warning there. Megan John says, big boomers in Minnesota. Fun with Tech is here, and Mike Wan. Ryan Toomey mentions nice line of storms running through Oklahoma, through Illinois. And Victor Cabot made it in here. And Ryan says the Nebraska storms earlier, around 3 p.m., got up to 50,000 over Nebraska City. Carl Berghoff checking in, and Sarah Wood. And Brett Dean. And Greg says, Chaser Tom Purdy had a tornado today near Papillon, Nebraska, around 5:14, and Skip Talbot was watching a funnel cloud near Rockport, Missouri, around 7:26. Tornado reported near Blanchardville, Missouri. So we got storms going on here and there around the Great Plains, and I do remind you we're not going to be able to cover every last storm because that would kind of run up the amount of time we spend on this webcast. And we're trying to keep things kind of short and kind of hitting the points of interest for the day. Now here on this animation, you can see this front has become quasi-stationary through central Kansas there. So not much movement, and in fact, we've even got a little bit of initiation back behind the front in this area. And that doesn't always happen because a lot of times your moisture back there will be in short supply. You'll have lower dew points in that area. But in this case, we've got a little bit of mid-50s dew points back there. You can see 61 there around, I guess that would be north of Emporia, north of Salina. Concordia, that's the one I'm thinking of. So, yeah, a little bit of moisture hanging back behind that frontal boundary. Okay, let's check out the big picture, and we'll go to SPC, and we'll put up that temperature and dew point plot right there. And this shows the moisture axis to some extent, and I'm looking at the shading, the deeper green shading running right through this area. So that's going to probably correspond to some of your stronger storms. And there was an old rule of thumb from about the 70s and 80s where you would start out your analysis and look for the thermal ridge. In this case today, it would be in this area here. You'd plot out your moisture ridge. And the area in between would be where you'd be looking at for severe weather, especially where you have boundaries. So this rule of thumb does kind of hold up, actually, to a certain extent. And then just out of curiosity, I'll take a look at the divergence and vorticity. And this is strictly surface vorticity and surface divergence. And the field is kind of disrupted a little bit by the thunderstorm activity, but you can see the reds are concentrating along that axis right there. This would probably be a little bit more interesting before initiation. But down in Texas, where we haven't had much going on, you can kind of trace the dry line using that product right there. And then where the values are really piled up, that could clue you in where initiation is likely. So if we had enough moisture further back to the west, maybe over Capulan Volcano into Clayton would be a possible target. Is anything going on back there? I'm not sure. Let me scroll down and take a quick look. Looks like a couple little cells going up in that area, very high based. Probably just cumulus fragments there, but let's see if that area did try to initiate. Yeah, it's possible. Right here along the Raton Mesa down in Clayton. So if we had a little bit more moisture, that might have been another possible target there. Okay, so going up to the big picture, 250 millibars, we've still got the polar front jet well up to the north. Oregon and Idaho into Ontario. So the flow down across the Central Plains, not really all that strong. So 30 knots there, 250. But it does look like the subtropical jet is making an appearance right there. So picking up 70 knots there at Midland, 65 actually, and then 50 around Dallas and Lake Charles. But I think we are too capped in this area for any thunderstorms down in this region. And you can see the flow is not very strong over Texas at 500. So this is a subtropical jet regime, and you kind of saw that on the time lapse when we opened the webcast here. So it's showing up a little bit there on the infrared imagery. So subtropical jet probably running something like that right there. And it's helping to ventilate some of these storms here around the Big Bend. So Mexico getting probably a little bit stronger than average thunderstorms in that region. And then working up further northward, you see a little bit of activity around Coldwater and other storms going up around Iowa and around the Quad Cities just to the north of there. Okay, then as far as the fronts, looks like we've got a series of those just kind of working down from Ontario to Colorado. And then we kind of lose it through this area right here. We've had a little bit of frontalysis going on in that area. But the next system is approaching from the west. And you can see that a lot of the colder air, instead of being out in this area here, Washington and Oregon, it has kind of shifted a little bit further up into the Canadian plains, the Canadian prairies. So we should see a lot of this activity shift eastward over the weekend. Then a quick look at soundings. We might as well take a look at Dodge City. And this is going to be the, well, I pulled up the 0Z, but I want to see the 12Z, the morning sounding, because this is what you would be using when you were forecasting severe weather in that area. So there's Dodge City, and you can see the moisture is really not all that impressive. Mixing ratio is around 8 to 9 grams per kilogram. So it's definitely on the weak side, but it does have some depth. A few thousand feet thick, and pretty good cap there, centered at about 725 millibars. And very steep lapse rates above that. So man, if you could only move some moisture in, let's say we get some low to mid-50s dew points. The dew point line would look a little bit more like this. Then we'll lift this with mid-80s temperatures. And some pretty good cape there. That's going to be about 2,000 to 3,000. Probably closer to 3,000 right there. And there's the convective inhibition with this kind of scenario. So maybe this is what happened. Maybe we had a little bit of low to mid-50s dew points to the south. And in fact, yeah, there's in fact 60s coming up towards the cold water area. So moist air advection has really been kind of instrumental in helping to improve this situation. And that's kind of one of the big problems that you deal with when you're forecasting a chase or just forecasting convection in general, is determining the degree of modification of the low levels. Of course, we would have better success if we could fill in some of these gaps. All we have for soundings are this right here. And, I think we could do a lot better than that. A couple soundings here and there, that would make a ton of difference. But I don't make the policy decisions at the Weather Service, so anyway. Let's see, dynamics. I decided to pull up AWIPS. That's always fun to look at because that's what the Weather Service forecasters are looking at. Let me see if I can fit all this on one screen. There we go. So that's got the time block right there. So this is starting out from midday here. So right now we're looking at about this right here. So you can see a couple weak shortwaves moving across Minnesota, Iowa. I think there's probably some contamination with that, maybe a little bit of disruption from the convection. But here's a good shortwave right there over North Dakota. That's probably supporting one of the polar front lows there out in Minnesota. Pretty flat flow through the Rockies right here, and here's our next system off the Pacific. So let's see what happens for tomorrow's webcast. So now we're going overnight. And then for tomorrow evening, that's the picture we have right there. So looks like mostly channeled flow through the Dakotas into the Great Lakes. Our next system finally making landfall. Northern California into Oregon. Looks like a ridge taking hold in the Central Rockies right there. So this area around Colorado, Denver, looks like that's going to be under the influence of some subsidence just downstream from that ridge. So with that, it looks like most of the convection will move into Minnesota, maybe a bit of Oklahoma. Tail end of that boundary probably is going to end up something like that. So not a whole lot supporting convection along that boundary except for just convergence and forcing along that front. Then moving a little further, ridging kind of continues out into the plains for Monday. And then we get to the end of the run right there. The Pacific system moving pretty far inland and taking aim on the Dakotas right there. So maybe rain chances going up for Monday and Tuesday in Denver northward. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and go right into the forecast. And before I close out, we'll take a look at the radar one more time. There we go. Trying to fit everything into the frame there. So there's the picture we have right now. The polar front running something like that. So most of this is kind of north of a lot of where we live, except for those of you around Milwaukee and in the Midwest. Looks like that front will be heading towards Indiana and Illinois. So for tomorrow's webcast, that front will advance very slowly into the Lake Ontario and Lake Erie region, probably just clearing much of Indiana there, and there's that tail end of the front coming into Oklahoma. So possibly enough forcing there left for some convection around the Wichita, Tulsa, Oklahoma City area. And here comes our next Pacific system coming inland. So I'm going to go with something like that for the fronts, and there's a cold pool right there over Arcata. Then going into Monday. For webcast on Monday, it looks like that front will continue breaking up over Tennessee, northern Alabama, Arkansas. So rain chances along that front right there. Most of that will probably be non-severe, except where we have upper level, where we have stronger winds aloft. And I'm not too sure we're going to have that since we're kind of between systems. There's the next system coming through the Rockies. Looks like the dry line may be active in Texas there. Dry line should be something like that right there. Then for the webcast on Tuesday, just a series of fronts coming through the northern plains right there. So depending on where you are, chances of rain way up there. And with a faster flow, there will be some potential for some severe weather. Then for Wednesday, looks like things kind of pick up here in the Central Plains. More chances for organized convection there, especially up here in Missouri, where we have the low-level jet kind of feeding that area. Then for Thursday, things move eastward. Chances for thunderstorms and moving into Indiana. In Ohio there, here's the tail end of the front. Also some chances of rain possible in North Texas there late in the week. And we see some very strong thermal gradients in this area right here. And lots of rain and snow in the mountains there. So this looks to be like a pretty dynamic system coming together here. Then for Friday evening, a pretty good push of cold air coming into Texas. There's the leading edge of that right there. And here it looks like the best chance for any thunderstorms will be likely in Arkansas and eastern Oklahoma. Low-level jet will be kind of configured like that, so that's going to mean best chances for that area right there. Then cold air sweeps into the southern plains. So Saturday the 22nd, high pressure moving in. That'll start shutting things down. Possible severe weather in the Midwest here with this low pressure system tracking northeast. And then things should quiet down for Sunday. High pressure covering the southern plains, and then we get this strong polar system moving out of Canada. I haven't seen that in a while. So that'll be blasting south through the Dakotas, and then southward through the plains right there towards the end of the period. Okay, so that's probably about as far as I want to go on that due to the uncertainty after 250 to 300 hours there. Okay, before I take a look at the radar, let me just look real quickly at the chat here. 2 3/4 inch hail in Black Hawk, Iowa from Matt Bluma. 3 inch hail reported in Dodge City, Iowa at the top of the hour from Greg Schultz. And Brett asks, did anyone else get the notification and joined halfway through the lab? You might have to email me, let me know what's going on, because I don't really understand too well. I do know I had to schedule the webcast a little bit late, like around 7, and I had a little bit of trouble getting the YouTube interface to take the graphics and stuff, so Maybe YouTube is running a little bit late with all the Saturday evening webcasts going on. Okay, so let's see here. Just one more look at Kansas. That's the satellite before we lose all the illumination. Cold water storm is kind of back down a little bit. Looks like Larned is really coming together here. I remember they run a weather modification program out of Larned. I don't know if it's still there or not, but I used to talk to one of the operators there about 10 years ago, every now and then. So there's that one storm there. A little bit of seeding about 30 minutes ago, and then the storm got clear of that. And now we see it in this last frame looking pretty strong there. Not a whole lot of reflectivity gradient on the south side, but it does have that V shape. And some very intense reflectivities aloft there. So there's the core. Just west of Larned, up at about 45,000 there. And I'm checking the time up at the top right just to make sure that we're not having any misunderstandings due to a time shift from level to level. This is for 112 Zulu. This is 122Z. Yeah, see, there is an issue here. So what I'm talking about here, you see how I put this over this these high echoes aloft, this core aloft right here. I was looking at this, and I was looking at the product time, 112Z. Now, if I just skip down to the low levels, I would say, wow, there's probably a lot of overhang in this area here. However, there's about a 10-minute difference here going on, so you have to kind of keep that in mind as you're going through the radar data. Okay, so this is a little bit more representative here. This core is about right there, up at 20,000. And this stacks pretty much right over the low-level echoes. So not much overhang going on right there. Just mostly a lot of really high intensities there. And we can take a look at the storm relative velocity. And let's see, we've got about 43 out and 10 in, so that's not a whole lot of motion in there right now. So that would be kind of like a threshold severe cell right there. Okay, then further out, I guess we've got a couple more cells. Maybe I can check out some of these. I'm going to go to the Topeka radar. So we got one little tornado warning on that, and that's radar indicated around the Verdon area, 11 miles west of Falls City. A little bit of trivia, Falls City, that was the site of a Braniff plane crash back in the 60s. A plane actually flew into a thunderstorm right around Falls City. It was penetrating really low coming into Omaha. And it went down in that thunderstorm back in the 60s. I forgot what the name of the flight is, but I'm sure it's on Wikipedia. So I always think of that when I think of that area. So yeah, a little bit of a hook shape on this, and some strong reflectivity gradients right in there. Not much overhang really, but velocity is definitely showing a rotational signature here. The radar down to the south-southwest, we've got about, let's see here, Got about 45 in, 26 out. That's about 60 knots of rotation right there, and it's relatively tight. So, yeah, with something like that, I would be thinking of a tornado warning. So we'd be talking about this spot right here. That's what I love about these radars. You can put the street field on here and find out exactly where to send chasers. And we can see that that is embedded in a lot of rain and hail. So definitely a dangerous storm there. You would have a hard time seeing that tornado coming for you. There's the bear's cage, or basically just the updraft area, and the circulation buried back here in this rain shaft here. So possibly some new development. I'd be looking for that to be possible out in this area here. Could see some new mesocyclone formation in that region. And we're probably not quite up to that point yet, but I do see some strong inflow coming into this region right here. 35 outbound right there from the Topeka radar. Okay. I think that might be about all I have for today. So I'm going to go ahead and close it up, and I think we'll be back on at the usual time tomorrow. I appreciate you all joining, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.